Thank you, Worship. I scribbled the first draft of this motion last meeting when this issue came up for the umpteenth time, and I figured this would be a good way to get it to rest. Just because we've always done things in a certain manner, it doesn't mean we should continue to do them, and I think perhaps the long tenure of a lot of councillors has blinded them to the fact that this is something that we should probably address. Now, it's a year before the election, so this is a good time to kind of deal with this, because if we deal with it now, we don't have to talk about it again, and that's my hope. I hope councillors find the motion balanced, kind of between left and right, and consider it kind of a preemptive strike that allows us to put this matter to rest. Otherwise, it speaks for itself, and thank you to the clerk for reading it out for me.
I'm going to Councillor Bell, or Councillor Clark, you had yours on, I turned you off. Did you read on speaking order? Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Clark. No, hang on a second.
Thank you. Thank you, Worship. Well, first of all, this issue is very much an issue in the city of North Vancouver. Back in 1985, a developer-backed slate got 4 people elected in the 1985 election, and Park and Tilford Garden, Park and Tilford Shopping Centre is a result. It was so hot for them during that election, though, that they came back with 50% of the square footage, which was to be shopping centre, as the movie centre, and that has been a raging success. In fact, within a year, they needed expansion space, and they didn't have it because there was a shopping centre next door to them. So it's very much a City of North Vancouver issue. That was a developer-backed slate that did that. Across the nation, Rob Ford in Toronto, the Toronto mayor, the whole Senate scandal, the Prime Minister's office involvement, the past 2 mayors of Montreal, politicians in general across this country are in disrepute. The guy who saws wood and bangs nails, and the cop, the fireman, the nurse, the common man, the people who Labor Day is named for, these salt of the earth types are fed up, sick and tired of their elected politicians being in the pockets of developers. And this motion, in its own way, and it's totally unenforceable, no one can sign on to it, but I'll be very interested to hear what the flavor of the debate is here. The public is demanding this of us. It's come before us many times. I've referenced contributions to candidates at this table, successful candidates, people sitting at this table, taking money from developers and then sitting here and voting supposedly with clear conscience and no infringements. It's wrong. It's simply wrong, and this motion addresses it. Thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't necessarily think that this means that having the candidates having accepted a contribution from a developer means that they're in the pockets of the developer, and the size of the contribution, is a factor. Obviously, if contributions are under $100, you don't even have to indicate who they come from in terms of disclosure of your campaign sources. But in the end, all the contributions that a candidate receives are published in terms, if they're over $100 or $100 or more, are published. And I guess the public can make a decision as to how they feel about that. The problem is that in the process, that information isn't revealed until after the election. It's in the report that comes in from the candidates, so that it's a question of whether that information then influences how people vote the following election, which is 3 years away. So I don't think it necessarily means they're in the pockets. The problem is it certainly can add to the appearance that that such contributions may influence how candidates vote. And I know historically the issue of contributions from unions was raised when I sat on a different council, and legal opinions indicated that accepting contributions did not constitute a conflict of interest or invalidate the ability of a councillor to vote on the union contracts, for example. But it's the question, I guess, increasingly, because we've seen, as Councillor Clark referenced, a string of embarrassments, I guess, of elected officials at a variety of levels of government in terms of influence, if you want to call it, or the potential appearance of influence on how they vote on different issues. So I also recognize that it's up to the individual councillor, as I understand from the legal advice that we've had in the past, to determine whether or not they feel they're in a conflict of interest. Obviously, Councillor Buchanan tonight recused herself, not because of contribution, but because of her employment and an issue that we were dealing with, which dealt with her employer. And that's the responsibility that an individual councillor makes. And so I respect her for that. I am prepared to support this motion on the basis that I believe that while it's not enforceable from the point of view, it's still up to the councillor to determine, or council member, whether they're from mayor or councillor, to decide what they accept. I think if it's a guiding principle, and if it's something that it will help, perhaps, an indication of the desire that we want to see transparency, and that we want to clearly reinforce the image that the decisions that are being made by the council members are based on the evidence that's before them when a particular application comes forward, and then it's not influenced. So I will support the motion.
And Councillor Booker.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've run successfully in the past 3 elections, and never have I sought nor accepted campaign contributions from unions or developers. In fact, 95% of the money spent on my campaigns I spent myself in order to have an opportunity to be a voice at this table. So obviously it's not necessary to take that money in order to be successful. We as incumbents have a tremendous advantage simply because for the past 3 years, and in many cases many more years, our names have been in the local press. We have made decisions, we have records that allow voters to pretty much decide whether or not we represent their interests or not. So again, I say, certainly for those of us at this table, it's absolutely not necessary in order to accept that money to be successful. I think that there's a great deal of concern at all levels, with all levels of government, as to how ordinary citizens can participate in the process and not find that the outcome of elections is interfered with by people who wield a lot of influence by virtue of contributions. And while again this is not an enforceable motion, and it's really at present, in spite of the fact that the numbers when people are polled have indicated that this is an area that that the public wants addressed by the provincial government, one can only ask, why did the provincial government not move on campaign finance reform? Probably because at that level of government, they didn't want to give up that financial advantage that they enjoyed in their campaigns. And it's pretty hard to argue that in municipal elections there ought to be campaign contribution limits or restrictions on who can contribute, and then not follow your own your own arguments when it comes time to your own elections. So I urge all members of council to seriously consider how necessary it is to their chance of success to accept money from these sources. It certainly has found disfavor with a lot of people in our community, a lot of people who don't come out to speak to us. I suspect share those views. I will support the motion. I urge all members of council to seriously consider whether or not they want to even have that appearance of conflict, regardless of whether it is a legal conflict or not. Thank you.
Councillor Keating.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Most people I know and I talk to know, in fact, that I take contributions from both unions and developers, and they know that because I've been entirely transparent about that. And I think one can get a false analogies about Rob Ford and what's going on in the Senate. Those things are problematic because there was an attempt to hide and not be transparent. And I've never attempted to hide anything I've done. People I talk to also know that my fundraising, which has been successful, and in fact, in the political world, I pride myself as a good fundraiser, that has been done in keeping with the law. But I think people also understand that there's a bit of inside baseball about this, that this is an issue on this council, because, in part, because there are debates about the future of the city. And the implication here, of course, and it's been close to said, is that votes at this council table are for sale by campaign donations. And that, quite frankly, is incorrect. Of course, we have before us a motion that wants to spread that insult to the District of North Vancouver and accuse Mayor Walton of the same thing when we send this motion to Mayor Walton, when we send this motion to Mayor Watts, when we send this motion to Mayor Robertson, that in fact they are all, in fact, whether legally or no, in a conflict of interest because of their activities. And I get Councillor Bookham's point as well, because I was just recently engaged in another election campaign in which the party I supported campaigned on an end to all union and corporate donations. We worked hard for that. Yet people around this table, I know, supported other parties, despite that. Parties who were deeply entrenched in the idea of continuing those kinds of politics. I know what it's about. It doesn't mean I'm going to sign a declaration of unilateral disarmament at this level. I'll continue to conduct myself in an open and transparent way within the law. In fact, I will encourage others to do it, because while some of us may be in a position, as I am, and as Councillor Bookham is, to use our own personal wherewithal to get elected to council, other people are not, and would never have the chance to get involved in politics were it not for fundraising of some kind. And in particular from union fundraising. And I know many people at various levels around this table have accepted union contributions. And I don't find that wrong. If you want the union endorsement, accept the union contribution. I think we should be very clear about whether or not we feel that's a wrong thing. And if it's wrong, please tell the people in this city what was wrong with your decision. I'm not going to support this. If there was a further resolution to come forward that condemned the provincial government for its failure to, in fact, introduce legislation in this area and for its lack of courage, I would support that. If there was another motion that came forward that encouraged the provincial government to ban all union and corporate donations and replace it with a system of public financing for election, I would support that. But that's not what's on the table, Your Worship, so I don't support this.
I just make a few comments. I get it. I understand. It's not something that we struggle with only. It's other levels of government struggle with only. I receive contributions, and people think that there's some sort of return favor that's implied, and that just isn't the case. That just isn't. I know that we have to put the full disclosure on the web, which I do, and I think the city was one of the first to actually put it on before it was required, and to have it there. And I think previous elections as well, I certainly support that. I think it should all be very clear and transparent. But I do also realize that there are some that might not have that ability to get elected. When I was first ran in 1993, I received funds from CUPE, the union, and it helped me actually pay for the election. I wouldn't have been able to do that. And so there are some challenges with the system as being proposed here. I can tell you that all the members, the vast majority of elected officials in Canada do so for the right reasons. I think everybody at this table does so for the right reasons. They come here because they believe in the community and want to make it a better place. Now, we may have philosophical differences about whether it's up or down or wide or how we vote on an issues, and that's totally fair. But I never once believed that any member here is here because they owe somebody to something, whether they owe some certain project or development or public amenity. I think that they're here because they really want to do better for the community. And so I will not support this. I think people believe in me and they know what I'm about. I think I've been very principled. I've been very respected. And people support that. And to run for mayor, is not a cheap endeavor. Last time I ran, there was 3 others that ran against me, and you have to put a campaign together. If you don't put a campaign together, there's many mayors in the region have had, and councillors who just sit on the laurels and they don't get reelected. It didn't work out. So you have to put the time in. So I believe that the provincial government has to address this. They're the ones. I would love to have support limits on donations. I would love to have that type of thing. I'd like to have better disclosure, disclosing it even as you get the dollars before the election's even called or before the election is held. I don't have a problem with that. But this is a level that the provincial government has to deal with. And they're the ones that set the rules. And I think everyone comes to this table, every one of us, with the right intentions. It's not going to be that they can be bought by one particular group or another. I was it was in the mid-90s. There was a redevelopment on Marine Drive, and I received some funds from a developer along there. It came to council, and I flat out refused any of the redevelopment. It was some tall stories where Dave Buckford and Dick Irwin were going to do. They did not call me. They were not upset. They said, we liked your philosophy at the following election. We think you are a good candidate. You may not have supported our project, but we think you provide good governance for the city. And I think that's what they expect. They don't expect any favors in return. That's not what Canada's about. So I'm going to go back to Councillor Haywood for a wrap-up.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say, as mover, I'm not impugning motives of any member of council by this. I think we're having a really good, robust debate on an issue of very important principle. And but I think the issue is, according to an old axiom that was given to me by an old politician, that Caesar's wife must not only be virtuous, she must appear to be virtuous. And I just think that time has moved on, and we have an opportunity for leadership. We can't say and keep asking senior levels of government to do something that we won't do ourselves. That just doesn't make sense. So I don't want us to lose and let this opportunity for leadership in this area of improving governance and be transparent. Transparency is not enough. Transparency, as the mayor pointed out, was a great improvement, but a consequence of transparency has been examination. And the next step is to look at the results and say, that just doesn't look right. There is an appearance of a potential conflict of interest that we don't have to tolerate. And the argument about not being able to fund the campaigns, I don't doubt that every incumbent member of this council has the ability to get the funds a different way from individuals because of their long-standing reputations in the community and their networks. So it's not for them, and I don't think that developers and unions are going to go fund non-incumbent candidates to any great extent either. So the argument that it is to try and support newcomers doesn't make sense to me as well. So I hope we take this opportunity for leadership and that it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Poll votes requested, please, Ms. Gray.
So on item 23, a poll vote. Councillor Bell.
Yay.
Councillor Haywood.
Yay.
Councillor Bookham. Yay. Councillor Buchanan. Yay. Councillor Keating. Yay. Councillor Clark. Yay. Mayor Masato.
Nay.
So the motion is carried 4-3.
Thank you. Next item, please.